Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I am Cullen McFader, joined as always by Clark Coffey. How are you, Clark?
I'm doing okay, dude. It's been a challenging couple weeks. May have some interesting changes on the horizon, but as they come, I might share some of that with the audience. But yeah, been a challenging couple weeks, but I'm here. I'm excited to record this episode with you. Now, it may not in the release schedule seem like it's been a while since we've recorded, but it actually has been. Mm-hmm. You've been in Afghanistan, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, I'm doing all right, and it's good to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm excited to get back to it. We won't spend too much time on it, but yeah, I was working over there for about 2 months.
That's wild.
And then when I got back, I think in both of our lives, things have just been so busy. And so even after me getting back, it's been actually about a month since I've gotten back. So it's been over 3 months, I think, since our last recording, even though, again, it may not seem like that from our release schedule. But,
because we have some in the can usually. I can't believe it's been 3 months. I mean, I guess so. It's been pretty much all of summer. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are both, I think, kind of itching to talk about something, and hopefully we don't seem too rusty. I don't think we are. I think thus far we're hiding it pretty well. So,
well, you know what? We'll just keep on. We'll just keep on thinking that, and it'll be what it'll be. But yeah, it has been 3 months, and I definitely missed getting to chat with you about films. And this week's is your choice, and I don't know if surprised is the right word, but I'd never even heard of the film, which is kind of crazy. I don't know how this missed me, but your choice, The Descendants, Alexander Payne, 2011 film, won one Academy Award?
Or Best Adapted Screenplay, yeah.
Okay, best, I could see that. I thought it was a really strong screenplay. But yeah, somehow this film just flew right under my radar, man. So when you were The Descendants, I was like, The Descendants, what is that? I had to go look it up. I had to go buy the Blu-ray because it wasn't streaming
Disney
anywhere.
movie the one that
We'll do that one next.
Yeah. We can do the Descendants duology. Although I think there's 8 of those Disney ones now, so we might have a little bit of a
we'll do a side
podcast on our hand.
Yeah, we'll do a spin-off podcast. Oh. So, but yeah, I'd be curious to kind of hear what your thoughts were as to, kind of why did this one bubble up, in a cauldron with all the other films you could have possibly chosen, that this one bubbled up to the surface and you snagged it. I'm curious to know why.
Sorry to bother you. I'm Matt King. Yeah, I've come to pick up my daughter, Alexandra.
Alex? Dad? What's up, Dad? What's happening?
You need to come home and see your mom. I'm the backup parent, the understudy. I thought you were supposed to be getting your act together.
I've been doing really well, actually. Nobody ever seems to notice that.
And with Elizabeth, my wife, in the hospital, my daughters are testing me.
Look who's here. Get out of my underwear, you freak.
Oh, okay.
Don't
Back inside now.
Real good job you're doing.
We have to go through this thing together. You and Scotty and me.
Dad, this is Sid. He's gonna be with me. I'll be a lot more civil with him around.
What's up, bro?
Don't ever do that to me again. I have to go around and tell people what's happening. Family and a few close friends.
I don't want to talk about Mom with anyone.
Look, whatever you two fought about, you have to drop it. Grow up.
You really don't have a clue, do you? Dad, Mom was cheating on you.
Who is he? I'd like to know who the guy is that my wife was seeing.
What you've been going through, that's a tough deal.
I'm just trying to keep my head above water.
I'm gonna hit you.
How often do old people just haul off and cold cock you like that?
Well, I think, I'm assuming that we both sort of have a list of movies that just as like a back kind of list of like, oh, this would be an interesting one for the podcast. And I kind of like write down things that I think we would have interesting conversations about. This was not on my list. But I saw this the first time when I was 13, back when it came out in 2011. I went
But
to
a
the
wee
movies.
child.
Yeah, so, but a wee little lad.
Yeah.
And I saw it with my mom, and
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it much since then. But then I saw The Holdovers, which I liked.
Yeah.
Alexander Payne's movie that just came out last year.
Uh-huh.
And I enjoyed that one, and so I thought, I remember as a kid actually surprisingly enjoying this movie. For those who haven't seen it, it's kind of like a straight drama or dramedy.
Dramedy,
But
yeah.
there's not too much there that, again, like a 13-year-old would kind of latch
Right. It's
onto. But
yeah,
I
it's
enjoyed
surprising.
it. I remember
Yeah.
coming out of the movie with like a positive impression of it, and I've
Well,
always thought back on it.
there are some
As
kids in the. I mean, the one thing I might say is that I think that the characters that are children in this film, of which there are a few, and they have a
Mhm.
predominant role. I think at least three. Right? There's three like predominant or significant children,
Yes,
young persons,
young actors. Yes.
young people characters. And I think that and we will obviously we'll get into this a bit more, but I feel like the film, does a really good job presenting these characters as interesting. They just happen to be young, but I feel
Mhm.
like the film does a good job respecting those characters and portraying children. And so I don't know. I'm
With
hypothesizing
depth, yeah.
maybe with depth and but also with humor and so I'm curious. I mean, maybe that stuck out to you. Sometimes when you're a kid and you're watching a film and there's actually like kids are well represented, with depth in a film that stands out, even if
Mhm.
you can't articulate it at the time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure why. I mean, if I could go back and ask myself,
Yeah.
I should have made
Who
one of those
knows?
videos that people do online when it's like talking to myself 10 years later, and they like make a video of them answering questions when they're young or asking questions when they're young, and then they go back and re-record a video. I'll do one of those maybe. Maybe now I'll do it.
Mm,
But no, and so I think that I saw The Holdovers, and then I rewatched this probably about 6 months ago, I want to say.
mhm.
Um, and I enjoyed it, but it's very, I think, very different than a lot of the other things that I would usually enjoy a movie for.
Mhm.
Um, I think that we've kind of talked a lot about how, I'm not super concerned with like plot and a lot of plot moving forward with dialogue, especially, and things like that. Like those are things that I usually find less interesting in a movie. And so I
Hmm.
think more than anything, I'm curious as to why. I honestly don't really know in specifics why this movie stuck out to me as something that I
Yeah, that's
did
fair.
enjoy, because
Well, maybe
usually I
that
don't
will.
enjoy these things.
Yeah. Well,
And then
maybe that'll come
on
to light.
yeah, yeah, and on the other hand too, I thought, I think we both sort of sometimes go like, okay, what's something that we haven't really done on the podcast before?
Yeah.
And normally I think we both sort of try and go into something a little bit more obscure, something that like maybe less people have seen,
Attack of the
or that,
Clones.
yeah, Attack of the Clones, or maybe next week we'll do Indiana Jones. Um, but but I think I sort of thought in the opposite sense, like we've done dramas before. I mean, we did Network, and we've done
Yep.
the Path of the Serpent. That's what it was called. Right?
Embrace,
Yeah,
embrace of the
Embrace of the
serpent.
Serpent. So I'm thinking of
Yeah,
Path of Pachali. So we've definitely
we
done
did that too.
dramas, but those are usually, in a sense, I mean, like Embrace of the Serpent was quite experimental in several ways. The Network is also from the 70s, so we hadn't ever really done, to my best recollection, a straight contemporary, just like, character driven drama or dramedy. It's not necessarily like
Mm,
a hard drama. It's quite funny in a lot of places, but it seemed like a kind of genre and time of movie that we hadn't yet done, as
okay.
ordinary as it is. So I thought, it might be interesting to kind of try and talk about this one, and see what sticks out in this sense, and maybe we'd have a lot of different things to say about this that we haven't really talked about
We'll
in terms
see.
of like craft before. So thought it might be interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, like I had said, that I wasn't even had no I didn't even know of this film when you told me that this was going to be your selection. I literally had to go look it up. For somehow what I just it just slipped through my cracks, and not only had I not seen it before, I wasn't even aware of it. I had to actually go look up Alexander Payne, and I mean I know this is horrible. I should know, but you can't watch everything or be aware of everything all the time. There's just not enough time in the day. But yeah, and then of course, as soon as I looked him up, I was like, oh yeah, okay, of course, yeah. So I saw the holdovers as well. I've seen probably 4 or 5 of his films, and I guess I never felt compelled to go, l- dive into Alexander Payne, and you know what I mean. I think his films, like and we can talk about this a little more, but it's interesting. In some ways, he's silent, I think, behind his
Mm.
films,
Mm-hmm.
and which is not all bad. I don't mean, but it's just, I guess, for whatever reason, I just never felt compelled to go look up. Well, who did Sideways? Who did The Holdovers? Who did About Schmidt? Even Election, and I remember watching Election when I was younger. I don't know why. Sometimes I watch a film and I'm like compelled to go look up the director and, oh, who is this person behind this film, and how did ooh, I want to know more about this person. And I guess I just never had that feeling with his films. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of interesting because in a way, this I think he has a tone that seems fairly consistent. You'd talk,
Mm-hmm.
we'd kind of talked just real briefly about that before we hopped on, but in a lot of ways, though, I mean, he's definitely not a flashy director. Um, his style is quite invisible in some ways. So yeah. Anyway, but I have to say, like, all in all, I enjoyed the film on the viewing. I thought that the writing was one of the standout aspects of the film.
Mm-hmm.
The performances are really good as well, and I think that's really the strong. That's kind of the areas where the film is the strongest. A lot of times you see this, I think, that films that are kind of approaching this same type of subject matter. It's where we've got this kind of, I don't know if you call it like a dramedy or a tragic comedy, or
Mm-hmm.
but we have here this, like, really, dealing with the death of a spouse or parent, having to make a decision to pull the plug, which is kind of a lot of this what sets this film in motion is the fact that Clooney's character's wife is
Mm-hmm.
in a boating accident, and it basically becomes brain dead. She has trauma, head trauma, is basically on life support, brain dead. So they're choosing to remove her from life support, and she's going to die. And so that's what kind of sets everything in motion here in this film. And so to deal with that, I think in like a somewhat like a believable kind of realistic way, and have these interesting relationships here. I feel like the film does a really good job of that. But then there's some other areas where stood out to me, and maybe this is my own preference. I mean, all of this is my own preference. It's our subjective preferences, right? But I found myself wanting there to be um, m- more support from the visuals in the
Mm.
film. I felt that the writing is strong, the performances are strong. They're dealing with the subject matter in both like a sensitive but humorous way. It's not saccharine, it's not overbearing, it's not melodramatic. I mean, the tone is really spot on for me, and I felt that was so strong. But I just found myself wanting to be like, yes, and could you also use some visuals to tell this story? Like, could you
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
it's a movie, this could have been a play or a novel or something else maybe, but it's a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt a little bit of frustration there, or a little bit of a longing, but we can go into that more. Um,
Yeah. No, I think you're right in the sense that it feels very theatrical in a play sense. Like it feels, again, it's driven by its strengths or its performances, its dialogue. It has, these. I will say the one thing that I think again that Alexander Payne uses very specifically that is specific to cinema is his editing, but that also goes with what you were saying with the tone. Like I think in a sense his biggest kind of auteurship over all of his work is tone. He's always kind of dealing with these oftentimes older people who are having to deal with younger people who are sort of
Older
misfits.
people. Whoa. Older
George
people.
Clooney looks great in this. He looks wonderful. He doesn't look a day over 20. But
Okay,
there's
I
always
see
kind
where
of
you're
this
going.
of the 3 movies of his that I've seen, I'll say I haven't seen like Downsizing. I'm sure that's very different. But when he approaches subject matter like this, of course, in The Holdovers, there's also a very minor subplot about the main character whose name I'm blanking on there's father being in a hospital, like a care home kind of thing. So there's he seems to be attracted to these stories about like sort of a stressed out maternal or paternal figure dealing with the kind of loose cannon younger person who's dealing with the same thing but in perhaps a less healthy way. Of course, the twist of this movie being that George Clooney's wife was actually having an affair on him prior to this boating accident, and that's kind of where
Which he finds out from his daughter. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, who is having a lot of difficulty kind of dealing with the fact that her mom is now in a coma. I think the idea is that their last conversation
as one
was a
would
big fight.
to be fair.
Yes,
it's I mean
so it's these very
Understandably.
very kind of subtle, I would say subtle.
It's life stuff. It's life shit. I would call it, right? It's like, I mean, these are the things that happen to all of us in one. Not exactly
It's
in this
nuanced.
way, but
It's nuanced.
but
Yeah.
and it's I think it's. I mean, this is a really tough tone to hit, right? I think part of the reason that it's tough, a lot of movies try this. Well, not a lot. I mean, some movies try this. I think a lot of people are afraid to kind of even go to the places where this film goes because, so many, right? It's like you've got, Mission Impossible 18 and Tom Cruise is, jumping out of airplanes and jumping motorcycles off cliffs and stuff. And everything it's basically, that's a comic book, right? I mean, there hasn't been a Mission Impossible comic book, but that's kind of what the film really is, right? It's like these just insanely ridiculous over the top scenarios with really plainly or clearly drawn characters. This guy's good, this guy's bad, generally speaking, right? There's sometimes they'll trick they'll throw some nuance in there, but it's only nuance in relation to the fact that everything else is just so black and white, right? There's not really any nuance, and so many films are like this. It's whether it's like a heist film or a film about con artist or this or that or whatever. I mean,
even a lot of modern day dramas, they kind of lack
everything. It's so heightened that in a certain sense, those are easier films to pull off because we don't experience that in our day-to-day life. We don't know what the hell that would actually be, right? Like there's a movie about some kind of, spy, MI6, and they're doing this thing or whatever, it's like, you could tell us anything. You could put almost anything on that screen. And we don't relate to it. This is not anything that happens in our daily life. And so we can suspend our disbelief till the cows come home because we have no way to judge it really. Right. And there you go. But when you've got a film like this, where, ultimately, look, all of us are going to have to face in one way or another the death of our parents, significant illness, or being a parent and struggling with, raising your children and, maybe you're estranged from, family members at different points in your life. I mean, these are things that people actually do have real experience with. These are things that, and they're really difficult to nail down and to define and to depict. I mean, these are really the challenges of most people's actual lives, right?
Yes,
and they'll be some of the most challenging things that we end up confronting: our relationships with our spouses and our parents and our children. I mean, that's like real. That's the real deal, man. Right?
Yeah, and not not getting to say goodbye necessarily, maybe in the way that you wanted to, and
all these things, and And so huge props to Alexander Payne in my mind for even being willing to approach these things with some kind of
Yes. Yeah.
realness, right? And then to do such a great job with the tone in this sphere, and not being
Yeah.
afraid to have humor, because the reality is that this is where we have humor in real, like
Yeah.
humor
Yeah.
exists in within these like pools of trauma and tragedy, and it's often the only way that we can really deal with them is, and so sometimes
Yeah.
this strange humor kind of bubbles up from these, really difficult, stressful, uh, tragic experiences. Anyway, so that's before I start going off on the visual aspects of the film. I want to give like all those props to the
Yeah.
screenwriting
Yeah.
and performances.
Well, and I think one thing too that I would say that this movie is kind of, I think, stands out in those ways that you're describing is that there is a lot of humor, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of moments that are dramatic, that are kind of where the tension is sort of broken with humor,
Mhm.
and yet it still is earnest. Like, it's not cynical
It's
in the way that so many movies are today, where it
great
feels like
point. Oh, yeah.
they're breaking the tension of the humor to almost like
Yeah.
wink at the audience and say like,
Yes, yeah,
oh,
to
we know.
undercut.
Like, when I
Yeah,
was coming back on my trip, I for some reason decided to watch on the airplane the third Jurassic World movie. God help me, but
I don't even
um,
know which one that is, but
and it was like a very good example of what I'm talking about, though, where there's this moment where Bryce Dallas Howard's character, whatever her name is, like giving this kind of like short little monologue to basically this adopted daughter that her and Chris Pratt have taken in, and she's giving this like very heartfelt, you know,
Mhm.
thing, and saying like,
Mhm.
and it wasn't actually, it wasn't poorly written or anything. Like, it was heartfelt, and it was,
Mhm.
sincere. And
Well
then of
acted.
course you have to end it with the adopted daughter sort of saying, like,
She
well, that was
makes a fart
cheesy,
noise.
and
Yeah.
like, and
A
pointing
whoopee
out,
cushion
and so
goes off.
it's this weird thing today I've noticed a lot, where it's like, it's almost as though directors are like afraid their high school bullies are watching their movies, and they want to be like, don't worry, I'm not actually being sincere. Like, I'm
You know what
not
I
being
call this? I
earnest.
have a
I'm,
name
yeah.
for this. I have a name for this.
Hmm.
And I'm putting this on the record now that I've coined this. I didn't read this somewhere. I didn't steal this from anybody. This is mine. So trademark, copyright.
Yes,
I
patented.
call this pulling a Joss Whedon or pulling a Whedon.
Mm,
So
yes, yeah, that's a
if
good
just
point. Yeah.
in case people aren't familiar with Joss Whedon out there, he really rose to prominence. Was this like mid '90s with Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Yeah, and then he did
which
Firefly.
well, and then
Yeah,
Angel. There was
yeah,
Buffy,
yeah.
and then there was a spin-off Angel. You're right. He did Firefly. He's worked on some Marvel films, but a writer director.
Yeah.
But I actually really enjoyed Buffy. I thought that Buffy was actually a really fun show in its time, and it's, I think, one of the best series, frankly,
Hmm.
that's ever been made. But that was like his stock and trade. He would, right, it was like you would have this dramatic moment, and then always undercut that with humor right at the right. So it'd be, this dramatic moment, this very vulnerable moment, and then we'll undercut it with humor so it doesn't. And I think part of that, and you bring an interesting point. I think part of that kind of does keep things from becoming saccharine. It keeps things from becoming melodramatic. But there is also what you just pointed out, which is that it also kind of keeps you from having to get too far out there, and it right, you're kind of pulling your neck back, right? You don't want to stick it out too far,
Hmm.
and so I think you're right. I think this is a really good point. Um, and you can take that too far, and it can be a bit of a crutch. So it takes guts, you're right, to not undercut it, to not have that safety net of every time I've got something vulnerable, every time I've kind of got a dramatic moment, I have to like end it. The button has to be humor at the end
Hmm.
so that it's not too far out there. And because you're right, being earnest is scary. And to be
Yeah.
earnest throughout like the entirety of a film. Now, this film definitely has humor, but you're right. It's a great observation. Payne isn't using humor to kind of undercut the vulnerable, earnest, dramatic moments. They're inside those moments.
Mm-hmm.
They're like an
Yeah.
organic part of it, not not a what do you call that? Oh God, what do you call the little like when you're having a multi-course meal in between courses? You have to have that like
Oh,
a
the
palate
palate
cleanser.
cleanser. Yes, yeah.
What is
Like
it?
a little bit of ginger or something, or
Is that an amuse bouche? What is you anyway?
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. I think
Okay,
so. Yeah.
but I almost feel like there's a lot of times writers and or directors kind of feel that that's necessary, right? Well, we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
get ourselves too far out there. I think it's a lot harder to use comedy the way Payne does in this film, where it's actually interwoven organically into those vulnerable, earnest, dramatic moments, not
Mm-hmm.
as a button at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the strengths of this movie are that everything feels, it kind of feels just like the phrase, like if you don't laugh, you cry, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Mm-hmm.
these characters are dealing with these. And well, the other thing too is that oftentimes the characters aren't themselves acknowledging the humor of these situations. The humor, it comes out of the fact that they are experiencing things that are a very relatable to anybody who's gone through any sort of like family
Mm-hmm.
drama themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but B, it's this kind of thing where you have. I'm sure everyone's gone through this where it's like okay, what else is going to happen now? Like I'm already dealing with enough, and so there's just this kind of sense of like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you don't laugh, you cry, and you're right, and that's much more difficult to nail in terms of tone, not only on the side of like being, ballsy enough to do it and to be earnest and to be, not afraid of being accused of being melodramatic or whatever, but also just the even technical skill of writing dialogue that plays well in that sense, and the technical skill of performing that dialogue. I think that we've mentioned it a few times, but yeah, the performances both on the part of the adults and the kids
Mm-hmm.
um, are really good throughout. They really handle the material um, exceptionally well, I think. And if one of those performances was off, I don't think the movie would work, because I think that you need this very good dynamic through, like, there's a lot of group um, like the bigger kind of, I would say, in quotes, set pieces are these kind of larger group moments with like the four of them in
Yeah.
whether they're in like a car or they're going off to deal with something. And so I think, yeah, you really you have to have a very strong technical sense of like writing and performance to nail those moments, because otherwise, yeah, you just end up either it falls flat and it feels like it's tonally all over the place, or you end up falling back on that kind of, yeah, that sort of a little bit just yeah, like you said, pulling their neck
I
back.
mean, well, one of the example, like an example that sticks out in my mind, I think there's numerous, but one of them that I was like particularly stuck out to me was when, Clooney's character is having a conversation with this boy, it's like the boyfriend of his older daughter, and I forget his name. But is it Sid? I think it's Sid,
Hmm.
played by Nick
Yes.
Krause, is the
Yeah.
actor. And I feel like, um, he's they're like it's in the evening and everybody's gone to bed, and Clooney kind of walks in to where Sid is sleeping on the couch, but Sid's awake, and they have this
Hmm.
really brief exchange where up until this point we've kind of seen Sid as just this kind of goofy teenager, and he's actually got some really funny moments, I think,
Yes. Yeah.
in the film, but they have this really earnest moment where he shares that he's lost his father in a drunk
Hmm.
driving accident. And there's even this small detail where Sid says they were both drunk. So, meaning his father was drinking and the person who hit them, and which is just kind of an interesting little small wrinkle. And the film, he just mentions it kind of in passing there. But, it's just this tender little moment. It really doesn't do there's no plot or exposition. There's nothing that's not moving anything along. It's
Hmm.
just a brief moment, and but I think it encapsulates how well the film manages that tone. It doesn't get overly melodramatic. It doesn't get melodramatic at all, but it also it just feels very real, and Yeah. So I guess what is my point? My point is that um, the writing and the performances, like I've said, are definitely the strong suit. And there's just little moments like that
Hmm.
that I do feel are so strong. Um, and yeah, I mean, this guy, he when he worked on um, Election. I want to go back to Election because I feel like Alexander Payne in this film and a few others shows that he's a really good director of kids. I think,
Mm-hmm.
which is like reasonably rare, and I would imagine hard. I've never directed kids myself, but directing adults is already hard enough,
Hmm.
and I feel like that's a rare strength as well. Um, so I don't know. You were talking about set pieces, and even though there's only a couple actors in that scene, I just felt like it was like a really sweet moment. It was one of the sweeter moments that stand out in my mind in this film
Yeah, yeah.
because I
And
feel like in so
again, I
many
mean, I think
films
that that's
that yeah. Go
sorry, go
ahead. Go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Or oh,
No,
okay.
no.
I'll take over. The I just wanted to point out what you said about like the wrinkle of like both of them being drunk, about how that in itself kind of encapsulates the a very good again tone of this movie where it's like yeah things are always complicated like there's not
Mm,
the tough part about that is maybe if his dad was to be hit by a drunk driver and he was sober then there's kind of a clearer
yeah.
moral thing there, right? Where you can sort of more clearly establish that. And yet he just sort of throws in that little line, like you said, about they were both drunk. And it's not grandstanding by any means, but it just kind of adds a layer of complexity to
Well, and
that.
story,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
immediately it's a really efficient way. So, in a certain sense, I guess you could say, well, this is about exposition, or it's a character moment, but
Hmm.
it's that is such a it is such an efficient way. Like it opens up. I mean, I think the instant you hear that as an audience, now your mind is going. You're kind of imagining, well, was his father a drunk?
Hmm.
What was like you were immediately asking questions in your mind and you're kind of visualizing different possibilities as to what this kid's home life might have been, what his
Hmm.
relationship with his father might have been. Um, and it's just exceptionally efficient. I mean, with that
Yeah.
one little word interjected into there, you've like opened up like this blossoming of all kinds of potential backstory for this character.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
a lot of lesser films would have kind of just had him be kind of the comedic relief, right? Which he is in a lot of places, but to give him um, more depth and to do it so efficiently, there's just all these little moments. I think one of the things that draws me to this too. I mean, it's that the way this film kind of handles this existential. There's a conversation that George Clooney, his character, has with the man that his wife was cheating on, and
Mm.
George
Yeah.
Clooney says like, well, these things don't just happen, and the guy's like, that's all that like all things just happen, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
so it's, and I think that that's kind of really getting at the heart of what Alexander Payne might be exploring or trying to say in this film. At the heart of it all is that here we are, these fallible imperfect humans with emotions just stirring around in our minds, and we live in this universe that's indifferent to us,
Hmm.
and bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people, and spouses cheat on their spouse, and how do these things happen? How does and I think we always want to, as humans we're storytelling machines, and we always want to find, right, well, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, right? I mean, this is the
Hmm.
nature of storytelling. This is, and we're always trying to do that in our life. We're always trying to see the patterns and draw causal relationships. And I think part of what's appealing to me with this film is that there's kind of a realization that that's not actually what's happening. We wish we wish that was what it was, because then we
Mm.
could predict it. Then there would be a reason. Then there would
Yeah.
be a meaning. But hey, guess what? That's not actually really what it is, man.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff happening, and we're just here trying to do the best we can to respond to it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a scary feeling. I mean, to really settle into that and see that we're just floating around, and that what will come is going to come, and so I don't know. That spoke to me about the film. That really stood out to me, and that was something that I appreciated. But instead of trying to speak, in some Kubrickian way to that, this is just like a super down to earth. Like, this is shit that's going to happen to all of us in our lives in one way or another, by and large, and you're going to have to deal with it. And sometimes it sucks, and it's hard, and sometimes it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and it brings out, yeah, exactly. Like I think that's the thing, is it's not, the movie's not dour in tone. It's not, its message again is not cynical. It's not that's not the thrust of the film. The thrust of the film is just very, I think, human and complicated, and
I like that. I like that non-cynical.
Yes.
You've said that a couple times now, and I just want to reiterate, I really do appreciate that about this film, is that it's not cynical. And I think you and I have talked about this before in some other films. Like, certainly there's a time and a place for that, but I feel like maybe the pendulum has gone a little too far to the cynicism. Everything is like postmodern, and it's like I watched, like, very briefly some of this. This is going to sound so off the wall and not related to this, but it was like something like Deadpool versus Wolverine, or Deadpool and Wolverine or something. And I saw like the first, I don't know, 15 minutes or something, and just even in the opening credit sequence, I'm just like, how much more self-referential, like, how much more like modern can you even get? You know what I mean? It's like, at some point the meta turns inside on itself, and I feel like there's just a dilution. I don't even know what this is.
Yeah, it's just like,
this probably makes no sense.
Of a copy 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 of a copy. Yeah.
And I feel like, again, I don't want to make this about Deadpool stuff, and I wasn't watching closely enough, but I feel like, have you seen the film?
No.
Okay, well, so the opening sequence is just like he's dancing to like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys or something, right? So it's like, ha ha ha, do you see how cool we are? We're like, here, like, we're really nailing this song that was probably like in our demographic audience's like childhood, and it's going to be perfectly placed for you to know it. And Deadpool is doing like the choreography probably that was from a music video of this song, and he's just like killing a bunch of faceless people in totally identical uniforms, in by throwing like bones at them. I don't. It sounds so crazy, because it's like, I know there's going to be somebody who's like a fan who's like, I have never heard of a worse description of a scene in a Marvel movie ever. This is outrageous. What a travesty. He's like breaking a skeleton into pieces and like beating the hell out of people with these bones, right? And it all to this like Backstreet Boys, and he's dancing, and it's like, oh, I punched this guy in the nuts, ha 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 ha, and then but then somehow we go somewhere else, and now we're like in this control room, and on all these monitors are like scenes from all these different Marvel movies, and now he's got to go like into these different timelines of all these different Marvel movies to go find Wolverine or something. I don't know, but I'm just like, it's just like how it's, and I don't know, maybe I'm off base, but I sense like a cynicism behind so much of this, that it's like I just feel like you can only take this like meta, postmodern, self-referential, like, we're just going to keep turning back on the last film, and then, you know what I mean, and it's just a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah, and cheapening everything, right?
I don't know.
And I think like a lack of sincerity about any of the actual emotional weight of anything that is happening in any of these moments.
And I'm going to stop this now, because we're talking about the Descendants and not Deadpool.
We'll do that next week.
But it is interesting. I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think that, I think Ryan Reynolds most typifies that cynical. And no disrespect to him as a human being, or, I mean, by all accounts, I think he's a great guy. It's not about that, but it's this persona that he's kind of got him, that he's in, and the films that he's in, and the way it's just, I feel like he typifies almost perfectly this place that we're at, with celebrity plus Marvel movies plus postmodern kind of self-referential kind of you are the product and social media and just kind of all this stuff rolled into one.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be off that now. So back to Descendants.
Yeah. No, yeah, but I think to point that to, this is, well, one of the things that I think was really interesting that I wanted to kind of bring up too was, again, I saw this movie in theaters in 2011 when it came out.
Yeah.
I think that the other kind of half of that conversation is that this type of movie, and I know Alexander Payne's movie that came out last year, The Holdovers, did have a theatrical release and, came out in theaters and won awards and stuff like that. But I think something like this, if it was made not by Alexander Payne, like identical movie, but made by someone who maybe is a less well-known director who doesn't necessarily have maybe the industry clout that he has, this would be straight to Netflix. Like you could totally see something like this going right on Netflix. And then even in that, to kind of expand,
I don't even know if I would
on
actually
that
see
point.
this going on Netflix. I mean, I get your point though. You're
yeah.
saying streaming, but I almost feel like Netflix kind of moves to the like high concept. I don't know.
Oh yeah, like
I
Young
almost feel
Sherlock
like
Holmes 7 or something.
yeah.
No, but like your Prime
I get
Video
your
or whatever
point.
this would be on.
Yep.
Yeah,
I get your point.
And at the same time, I think that a story like this would be approached in. I think I've brought this up a long time ago before in another episode, but that show The White Lotus, where it deals with not
Is that
necessarily
HBO, right? Is that HBO?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And not necessarily the same subject matter in terms of like,
Speaking
exactly
of cynical,
like this.
Speaking
But-
of cynical,
Yes, exactly.
White Lotus
Yeah.
is like the zenith of
Yes.
cynical.
And the reason I bring that up is just because, and I apologize if I'm repeating what I said last time we talked about it, but I think it's appropriate here too, is that that movie or that show deals with like family drama a lot. And especially the first season, like it's got this like family that's on vacation together and they're like each dealing with their own like weird, issues. And yet its outlook on humanity is that we are
Pretty bleak.
like lying, cheating, we'll stab anyone in the back, even if they're our own family. And it's funny. It's a funny show. There's a lot of humor in that show. And yet again, the humor is all at the expense of these characters. And so you come out of it with just this feeling of just like, man, all of these characters are bad people. And I'm not saying that you have to present your film with great characters. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I think that you should, if you're going to, it's just very cynical.
But they're like, it's like, let's explore this for just a second. I just follow me on this just tiny little tangents. But okay, and I'm just thinking this now, so forgive me. And this is, we do this live, everyone, and we're like finding our articulations and our ideas often as we're going on the fly. So bear with us. But I mean, okay, so how is this like? Let's take a movie like Taxi Driver. The protagonist in that film is a really troubled person, and so it's like the film is exploring that how this character that's really troubled, right? He's not a hero. Any interpretation of him as a hero, I think you're missing the point on that film big time.
Yes.
He's an isolated, lonely person with like delusions of being a hero, and it's like it's sad. Like this, it's a character study of someone who's actually quite sad, and then you have but he. What I'm trying to get at, okay, then help me articulate this. And then you have White Lotus, and like you said, this it's a show that's exploring like these people and their bad behaviors, whether it's infidelity, lying, cheating, whatever, right? But that's kind of what that film's exploring. But they're all like beautiful, and they're all like in some extremely fancy Instagram ready resort, and they're all rich, and everyone is pretty, and the wardrobes are beautiful, and the landscapes are beautiful, and we're at a resort, and so there's like this Instagram polish on everything, and so so there's something important. There's something is like really different between the two of these things, and I'm trying to find an articulation, but it's interesting. It's just there's like some veneer here. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's like yes, they're exploring some of the like darker sides of humanity, but not in any real way. Not in
Yeah,
any.
yeah,
It's what are we watching with like White Lotus versus
yeah.
something like Taxi Driver? Like what I so I don't know. There's
Or
something there
versus
that
something like
seems more
this, you know,
cynical.
like something like this where you could totally again, like the reason I bring it up is just because I think that something like this, if it was produced today or like procured today, would have that tone. You know, you'd have like bitter people, and it would be like the joke of the family drama would be like, oh, they all hate each other and they're
Hmm.
dealing with this thing, and then that's where the humor would come from, whatever it would be.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and for some reason that is what is popular to be made today. Like that tone is
Mm,
so, it
mm,
penetrates so much
mm-hmm.
across genre, but
It
especially
does.
in like these kind of like dramedy places. um and whereas again, you mentioned Taxi Driver. Like Taxi Driver to me is a film that is made with, in fact, quite an optimistic outlook on humanity, and it's almost like a warning of like, here's
Mm,
what happens when someone is isolated and someone is, you
mm,
know, cast out, and someone has these kind of delusions of grandeur. Like this is how far we
yeah.
can fall. um
Yeah.
because I think ultimately, you know, Schrader and Scorsese and, you know, all those people that were making those types of movies back then, um, do I think have more optimistic outlooks on life, even in their darkest movies. Like there's the thrust of
Mm-hmm.
their films is often that like these are bad things, not funny things. There's humor,
Hmm.
sure, you can intersperse in them. Like there's even funny moments in Taxi Driver for sure. Um, but at the end of the day, it's looking on these things and pointing at them and saying like, this is not good. Whereas something in the White Lotus,
Mm,
I'm not saying that it is saying that the actions of the characters are good, and yet it doesn't seem to really care about that. Like it almost seems to be like too cool to even
mm.
focus on any sort of moral compass of these characters, and more is just interested in laughing at bad people in uncomfortable, awkward situations.
Yeah.
And sure, I'm, you know, obviously, like you said earlier, this is all subjective. I'm sure that there are people who love that show and love that type of thing. However, I think that it's just so rare, to swing it back to the Descendants, to get something like this nowadays, where you have something that is earnest, sincere,
Yeah.
um, that is
Yeah.
dealing with these things, and sure, in many instances, making fun of these people, but in a more like human way, in a way that's like, yeah, we're making fun of them because that's all of us. We're almost laughing at
Yeah.
ourselves here.
Because it's
We're
all
not.
of us. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I think you're right. And the other one is kind of like we're laughing at them because that makes us feel better.
Hmm.
Some, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I think you're right. It's a combination of the perspective, the ultimate perspective of the filmmaker and just kind of what they're asking of the audience to do when they watch, these different pieces. Yeah. Okay. So
Hmm.
I just was, it's interesting. It's fascinating to me. So, okay. One of the things as we're getting already almost 50 minutes into this, we haven't really talked
Hmm.
about it, but I did want to talk about it a little bit at least. Because
Hmm.
now I'm almost wondering if I'm starting to change my mind having had this conversation now. I think
Those are the best episodes.
when I was first describing my like initial impressions of the film, I briefly kind of touched on how I kind of wished there was a little more to this film visually. Like, really strong screenwriting, really strong performances, but I wish that there was a little more going on visually. Now, the thought experiment I've kind of got in my mind is like, well, what would that look like? And would that detract from this really kind of down to earth earnest story that we've got
Hmm.
if we brought style or too I don't want to say too much, but if we brought like certain different styles into it visually, I wonder, would that disrupt things? And I
Hmm.
don't know what the answer is to that, but when I was first watching it, I just kind of it's kind of shot in a way that like I said initially, I just felt like I couldn't see Payne in this anywhere, and I
Hmm.
couldn't, I felt like it was just there's some talking heads in a room, or there's talking heads in a beach, and I wondered why there was as much cutting as there was. Why couldn't we just keep these two characters talking? Like when Clooney walks up to the wife of the guy who his wife had been cheating with, right?
Yeah.
When he walks up to see her, it's kind of they're meeting each other for the first time, and they're on a beach. She's like, her kids are playing in the ocean. She's got her back to him, and he kind of makes a decision to go walk towards her and initiate a conversation. And this is Judy Gear's character, by the way. And I I just wondered why that had to be. What it could have. I felt like you just keep these two characters in a two shot, and we can just have this conversation. There's like, they're on a beach. There's this landscape, so we could do some, like, contrasting with the landscape here. But it would end up being is like the camera is like in between them, and it's like you've got this short two shot that kind of establishes things, but then it just goes to like a wide one, or it's just not even over the shoulder. You've just and there's all these cuts, all these different focal lengths, because now it's like the conversation just kind of, we get to that point where, well, we feel like we should push in a little bit, and so now it's a little bit of a closer shot, and it's just single, back and forth, and the whole movie is kind of like that. It's like when characters in a room, I don't see blocking that emphasizes the story of the moment, the priority of characters or the power of different characters at different time. I don't see using like depth or even the width of the frame. This was like 2:3:3 or 2:3:5. I don't see any reason as to why that aspect ratio was chosen. It's not utilized at all. I mean, so much of this film is close-ups of people's faces. I'm like, 16:9 or even 4:3 would have been a more appropriate aspect ratio. Even though we're in Hawaii, there's very little utilized, from a landscape perspective. And we have so many shots where it's just a single person isolated in frame talking to another single head in an isolated frame, and just cut back and forth and back and forth. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's fine for this. But it makes me wonder, like, well, what if that element of this film were pushed?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting,
what,
like you said, it's a thought experiment about, like,
and
what
I'm not saying shoot it like Scorsese, I'm not saying we ramp up zooms and, we've we've got
have
like,
a dolly in on it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not even suggesting that, because that is obvious. I do like that. It's clear that would detract from the tone of this, right? I'm not saying that, but it's just composition and blocking within frame.
Well, perhaps a good comparison here is
maybe
like the
I'm
Coens.
Crazy.
Like the Coens kind of maybe do something similar. I mean, I think the Coens are a little bit more heightened typically than this. Even in their more down to earth films, there's still like a level of heightened reality. But no, it's an interesting thought, because again.
Or did you sense that at all? Am I just off base?
No, I think I sensed it, but I think it. I don't think it irked me. Maybe it was because also I kind of knew. I'd seen this before so many years ago, and so it wasn't surprising to me. And choosing the movie, I knew what I was choosing it for. So, but I also think it's also, I think in this conversation too, there's an interesting thing where it is kind of a great example of like the difference between like what does a cinematographer do in terms of the visuals of a movie, because I think that this movie is actually very beautifully photographed. Like, I think that the colors are vibrant, really nice. It's shot on 35 millimeter.
From a technical, just a technical perspective, I mean, they developed a decent image on the film. I mean, technically, right? It's in focus. They pulled focus okay.
Well, even like I think that there's some really nice very subtle, grounded kind of establishing shots. Like, you're not getting like sweeping drone shots of Hawaii,
which I'm not suggesting again. And it's not that I'm suggesting that, but it's like, and maybe it's just that I've been watching a lot of older cinema. I mean, like late 30s, 40s, 50s. And maybe it's just that, it's just the way the grammar of cinema has evolved. But I think the way that I described it to you earlier was that I just feel like films and I'm going to say television too, because now it's like there's such a blurred line, right? Streaming, cinema, I don't, but I just feel like the vocabulary, like what directors are like, the number of words that directors are willing to use is diminishing. That like there was a wider, almost a wider vocabulary of cinema in the past than there is now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and,
I
and
don't.
it's just
Yeah.
like
And,
now people are like, it's like, well, we're only using like 200 words of the language as opposed to 2,000, right?
yeah.
And it's not that everything is appropriate in every film, but it's just that I feel like it's shrunk. It's like the camera does almost nothing here. It does almost very little, and we have very little movement within the frame with actors, right? We don't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we don't even keep a wide enough shot for any amount of time to even have someone move,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's I wonder why. Like I'm asking just rhetorically. Or I don't, why do we have why is the vocabulary of cinema shrinking? And am I even making this up? Is this even,
Well,
maybe I'm just wrong
interestingly,
and
I
that's not
think,
happening?
and I haven't seen it since it came out, but I think The Holdovers, he does more with blocking and framing and things like
Yeah.
that in The Holdovers. Like he's doing more active work with the way that the actors are
I
interacting
have to
with
see
the
it
camera.
again.
Like I think
Again.
the thing with this is that it's shot completely, like the word that I would use for it is like completely ordinarily.
Yeah.
It's very utilitarian. Yeah, it's very utilitarian. It's like pointing the camera at who's speaking, at what's important in that moment,
And only
cutting to it.
who's
Yeah.
speaking.
And
but-
so
I
so
think
like
that's
my
the point. That's the point. Like, I think that's the thing, though, is that I just want to see the people like, maybe it's like my background in theater, but it's like, I don't want to see just Clooney's face when he's talking to
In
someone,
close-up,
and then
yeah,
and then I just see the person he's talking to when they're talking, and then I'm like, people move when they have conversations. People interact with their environment and surroundings, and I want to be able to look at the person who's not talking while the person is talking, if I so choose. Like I feel too forced. I think maybe that's what it is. My complaint is that I just feel like, as an audience, I don't get to have any say in anything. I don't get to look anywhere other than just a big, huge, giant face of George Clooney when he's talking.
Well, I think a good example of that actually is a good example of what you're talking about in terms of like a reaction I had negatively in this kind of sense was in Knives Out, if you saw it.
Okay, it's a movie I did not like.
There is a scene in that movie where it's like everyone is
The first
sitting, like
one?
it's like
The
the
f-
cast
'cause
of
they've
like
made a
12
few.
characters are all sitting in a like a
Is this the first one?
lounge. Yes,
The
yeah,
first,
yeah.
Okay.
And I saw like a behind the scenes thing where they were talking about like the math and like the notes that they wrote about establishing geography and making sure that eye lines weren't crossed because every character needed a close up and blah 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 blah. And I remember the entire time listening to that, just thinking like, well, why not just shoot it in wider shots?
Yeah.
Like I get that you want a close up on like maybe an important zinger line or something like that.
How
But-
about go watch 12 Angry Men and see
Yeah,
how they
exactly,
shot
yeah.
a bunch of people sitting at a table.
And that's a very good point. And that like 12 Angry Men is not fancy in its directing. It's not, there's not a lot of showmanship in the oh, look what we're doing with this. Like you mentioned earlier about you don't want it to be directed like Scorsese would direct it. Although Scorsese also has a very good ability to restrain himself. But it's an interesting experiment because obviously we don't know what this movie would feel like if it were any more complicated visually. I don't disagree with you. Like I'm like I started this episode out saying that I am a visual person. I would watch. We did Koyaanisqatsi. I love movies that are purely visual. And I love seeing moments with no dialogue where you understand everything about what each character is feeling just because of a look on their face and the way it's framed and things like that. There's not a ton of that in this movie, if really any. And yet I think maybe that's also the reason I like it because I think despite that, I do really enjoy watching it. And I do connect with these characters, and I think it's done so well that I'm almost willing to look past those things.
I guess I'm just what if. I'm just thinking.
Is
What
there a
if,
way
I
that
guess.
is there a universe in which that is done and this movie is even better? Probably. Maybe no movie's perfect except for Attack of the Clones, but but I think that it makes for an interesting conversation because also again Alexander Payne is clearly capable of doing those things. Like again, The Holdovers uses framing, uses blocking, uses like the interactions of characters on screen and where they're placed in the frame to a much greater extent than this does. In fact, I think like 90% of the dialogue in The Holdovers is shot in a medium or a two shot or things like that. Versus where this is, it's a lot of like single close-ups. But that said, again, like it's something that, of the 3 times now that I've seen this movie, it's never irked me too bad. I think
Yeah.
that in fact, I think it's one of those things that it's like always just kind of, again, maybe it's because I saw it when I was a kid, that it's just something that I expect going into this movie of like, it's kind of like a comfort food
Well,
in a
to be,
sense,
look, that's totally possible, and I don't want to beat a horse here, and we'll have to wrap up in a second. But and maybe too, it's just that this is what we're used to seeing now. I mean, this even though this is shot in 2011. I mean, you go turn on almost any series that's like on any streaming platform, and this is the type of filmmaking that you're going to see.
Yeah, yeah.
This is where we are. This is
Which
where
I'm highly,
style,
which ordinarily I'm highly critical of as well. Like I that's one of the reasons that we've talked about this before, but one of the reasons I find myself not as interested in television, even though there's like this whole idea that television is now cinematic and whatever that means.
right?
I think it still has all of
Widescreen.
those
It's
limitations.
widescreen.
Yeah, it's
And
widescreen.
it's
And
24
they're shooting on
frames per
expensive
second.
cameras
That's
and
all.
nice lenses, and
I mean,
they've got
literally, I think it just means to most people, even if they can't articulate it, it means single camera because you don't have as much anymore. But it used to that you'd have a lot of multi-camera shows on television,
Yeah.
and it means widescreen, at least 16:9, and it means, I mean, even 24 frames per second is not that used to not be in the purview of television, and so it's like those because those technical things are what started people being it's cinematic, right?
Yes, yeah. And every TV
Now-
show now is that's popular is like, quote unquote,
Is that
prestige TV, in the sense that like kind of like that term that HBO kind of developed, and then of course AMC came along and sort of, I guess, tried to work that into their own stuff too. But no, I can totally I can totally understand what you mean, and that sort of thing exactly is exactly what I'm normally critical of in a lot of things. But maybe for this is kind of like, to me, like the exception to the rule. Maybe because I appreciate that the dialogue is so well written here, that the performances are so strong. It's like one of those things where, because, quite frankly, a lot of prestige television these days has horribly written dialogue. Like it's like really, really like,
Well,
you're not even
we're
getting
past
that, right? You're getting.
I think we're I mean, not to get on a new tangent here before we wrap up, but I mean, I think we're even past the prestige television thing. Now we're in the glut of content. We're in the glut of content phase.
The schlock.
And but all right. Well, I think at a little over an hour in, we'll kind of wrap up. But it's just interesting to think about, right? I mean, some of these things. I really enjoyed the film. Again, I think we both agree that the performances and the writing is quite stellar. It's a super watchable film. But it's just interesting to kind of use it as a discussion point to talk about different trends and different in just from a technical perspective how things are shot. It's just interesting to me. You go back and you look at cinema from the 70s and it's cinema from the 50s and the 40s. It's just fascinating how grammar kind of evolves, and it feels like we're in an era of really limited vocabulary, and maybe that will change, or maybe that will morph into something else, or who knows what will happen.
A whole new art form.
But for nerds like us, it's interesting to discuss and ponder. And on that note, Cullen, it's been great to get back in the saddle. I'm glad you're home safely from Afghanistan. It's good to chat about cinema with you. I always enjoy it. And for everyone out there listening, we appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed as well. And until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yes, bye-bye.